What's up, everybody? Joshua Yale here, and if you are also a big comic book fan like me, then you're probably super stoked for 2024 because there are so many cool comics coming out, like the new comics for Deadpool and Spider-Punk, and a huge milestone for Miles Morales. And here to tell us all about it is the writer of all these comics, Cody Ziglar. What's up, Cody?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you. You're writing comics featuring 3 different characters who are currently getting the limelight, thanks to the movies. So what's it like to write these characters when so much attention is on them?
It's definitely not good for my nerves, but I think I've conquered that fear at this point. But it's truly a blessing. Like, I love all these characters. Like, I grew up reading Deadpool. Like, I read every single thing that he was in when I was in college. Miles, when he first came out, I guess at this point, 12 years ago, I still remember taking my roommate being like, "There's a black Spider-Man. We have to go to the comic book shop," and driving in, buying I think he had the first 3 issue condensed into one special and buying that. And then, I was also a young punk kid growing up. So playing in punk bands and finding out there is a black punk Spider-Man and being able to write that was I could not have asked for a better trio of characters to put my little fingers on.
Awesome. It feels like you were born to write these 3 characters. But let's run through them, starting with Miles Morales. He's hitting a landmark 300 issues. And as we see from the cover for that issue, he's certainly made a lot of enemies over the years. So is Miles in big trouble? What do you have in store for us for this big issue?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of chickens coming home to roost for this point. One of the benefits of Miles being around for so long and having so many talented writers that he has a really, really cool rogues gallery. And this is definitely his foray into having to face multiple of those. So, I think if you're a fan of the Sinister Six, you'll enjoy this iteration of these characters and how they play into Miles's life. And also you got some fun cameos I don't want to spoil that sort of pop up and help Miles. So it was very fun writing 60 issues, or 60 pages of an issue, but also stressful because I was like, how is this going to work? And it did work out. We got a nice collection of some really, really talented artists from Miles's history. It's cool, seeing all those names on a book that we all wrote together. So very, very excited. I'm also very excited for people read this and see all sort of the fun action we sort of cooked up for this.
I'm curious to get your take on this. Obviously, everybody knows Spider-Man Peter Parker, but what would you say is the defining characteristic that sets Miles apart from Peter?
One, I mean, obviously he's younger and he's a black Latino kid, but I think the big thing is that just his sort of family dynamic is so different. Most of Miles' supporting cast, including his family, know that he is Spider-Man. So he has that support system that I think Peter doesn't have sort of innately. If you're having a bad day at school and you got your butt kicked by Scorpion, you can call your mom and dad and have them sort of talk you through it, which adds a unique perspective to it. And also I think it sort of adds to that, Miles is a teen, and I think a really important thing for me growing up was my parents were there for me in such unique ways, and we're really a strong family unit. And I think that's something that helps separate Miles from Peter and a lot of the other Spider people is that his family not only supports him doing superhero stuff, but they sort of guide him, and he doesn't really keep it a secret from them. He's very, very open with them, and there's a level of trust I think that's sort of innate to their relationship that I think helps separate him from Peter. And a lot of the Spider people in some pretty big defining ways.
Let's move on to Deadpool. You're writing Deadpool's solo series with a brand new issue #1. That's huge. No pressure. And you did say that you were a huge fan of Deadpool growing up. So why is he one of your favorites? And what is it like getting to start a brand new Deadpool series?
Again, a little nerve wracking. You're like, oh man, there's so many good runs before me. Even Wong's run before me was so fantastic. The idea of doing a rom-com Deadpool is such a unique take, but he was the first character that I read that was I didn't know that you could be funny in comics. I thought you had to be very serious. So reading however many issues I've read of this guy who was sort of a goofball, but also balancing that out. They have this sort of serious runs that he goes into. It was just really sort of formative to my creative sense and my comedic timing growing up. And when I got asked to write a short for him last year, and then eventually from that short being asked to write a full run for him, it was a dream come true. And I'm excited to sort of explore that character, without getting too sidetracked by it. But I really find myself drawn to that 70% comedy, 30% drama. And I think Deadpool's a pretty perfect character for that, honestly.
You're writing a new Spider-Punk 4-issue limited series, and it's a follow-up to your Spider-Punk series from 2022. And the one key difference actually for Spider-Punk in the movie, Across the Spider-Verse, is that he's British there, but he's American in the comic books, right? So how do you reconcile that very significant difference?
Yeah, I think this definitely when having multiverses help. I think if we're Earth 138, the movie one is 138B for British. So I think that's the main the main delineation. But me and the creative crew, particularly like the artist Justin Mason, we were huge fans of the whole world when we first made it, and like we were even bigger fans of the world once the Hobie appeared in like the Spider-Verse movie. So like we decided to come into this one with like, what can we do that like sort of retains the thing that we really enjoyed with our first run, like it's unique to our voice, but also implement some of the things that we thought were really, really cool about Hobie's design in the Spider-Verse movie. So like this second run that we're doing is sort of a amalgamation of both styles, with like Justin still doing his thing, but also taking some of the cool flavoring that they came up with Hobie and Spider-Verse.
One more question before we have to go, but all these characters, they're rebels. What do you see as their common factor?
Oh, that's a really great community. That's a great question, but community, what drives them together. Like a big through line for this first one, for the first series was, the idea of like community policing themselves and like, Hobie, Spider-Punk trying to like find his place in the world. And this second series, a lot of like seeing that community being built. Like, what's it like once you like, defeat the Empire, and now you have to actually like sort of like run the place. And a lot of it is like, a lot of mutual aid, a lot of like looking after one another. And that's like a very important role for them, is that like they are definitely like, they're punks and stuff, and they fight the system and they hate sort of what the status quo is. But all of it is all built out of like a love for the community and trying to do the best for everyone that's part of that community.
That sounds so cool. I really, you gave me kind of like the warm fuzzies there. I think that's a great note to end on. Well, thank you, Cody, for getting us pumped up for more Deadpool, more Spider-Punk, and the big milestone for Miles Morales. Milestone? Get it? No. Okay, sorry. I'll stop. Actually, I won't stop, because I've got another peek into the future about Marvel's big crossover event. Now I am here with writer Jed MacKay, who's ready to have Marvel's heroes take a bite out of crime. Or maybe they're the ones who are going to get bit, because in this crossover event called Blood Hunt, the Avengers are going up against a unified force of vampires. What's up, Jed?
Not much, just get ready to talk about vampires here.
Cool, me too. Let's do it. So like, all the vampires in the Marvel Universe have come under one banner, and they're known as the Blood Coven. So who's running the show, and what does the Blood Coven want? What is Blood Hunt about?
Well, that's something that kind of remains to be seen. So then, the answer might surprise you. This is a situation where, night has fallen when it was not expected, and with the night comes the vampires. And our heroes are outnumbered, they're outgunned, and we are seeing them really being put on the back foot. Which is not a position they're comfortable in. As far as, the biting happening, I think that we're starting off with a lot of heroes getting bitten.
This event is being marketed as the bloodiest event in Marvel Comics history, and there will be special red band editions. Is this right? With extra pages full of explicit and bloody content. I've never heard of that happen before. So just how bloody and explicit and violent are you going to get here?
It gets pretty gnarly. It was an idea that came about from one of the Marvel retreats, and they ran with it. And so, you'll have your usual standard comic on the stands, but also being released will be a poly-bagged red band version where we have some extra pages or switching out some panels where we have Pepe just kind of going crazy. He's reveling in the ability to just kind of go off the leash and make a real horror event.
So on the cover to Blood Hunt, I see some Marvel heavy hitters. You've got Thor, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, but looming larger than any of them is, of course, Blade, who's obviously going to play a big part in any Marvel story that's got vampires in it. I've been reading his comics for a while. He's been hunting vampires for a long time, but what makes Blood Hunt such a significant challenge for him?
Well, this is one of those things where, Blade is always going after vampires his whole existence. And that's, private war has, largely remained private. Now, for the first time, we're seeing the entire world being afflicted with this vampire menace. So you could say on one hand, this is Blade being proved right. And on the other, we're going to see what happens when the, Blade, the Vampires Hunters Crusade suddenly affects everybody. We've got the Avengers in there. We've got Doctor Strange in there. We've got, the Moon Knight characters in there. from the books that I write, as well as, Miles Morales, Spider-Man's in the main book. We're going to see Dracula, of course. 'Cause, you don't get Blade without Dracula, and as well as Brielle Brooks' Bloodline.
Bloodline, that's Blade's daughter, right? So she's part of the story. What can you tell us about Bloodline? And is she going to be spending some quality father-daughter time, sticking vampires with dad?
We're going to see her put through her paces. I think it's going to be exciting. We're going to see some changes in that relationship, and we're going to see that relationship tested, as well as relationships between other heroes, given that they're in such a state of crisis.
Forgive me, let's get really nerdy about this. Vampires are dangerous to the average person, but when you think about it, their powers seem to pale in comparison to someone like Thor or Captain America or Captain Marvel, who can light up like the sun. Then there's Vision, who is a synthezoid. What does he have to be worried about? Although I did see on one of the covers, his face is being ripped off, so maybe he does have a little to be worried about. But yeah, how are you making the vampires a threat to Marvel's heavy hitters?
Well, we see pretty early on that whoever is orchestrating this whole, vampiric attack, they've taken the Avengers into account. Because if you're going to try to take over the world, you got to deal with the Avengers. So we're going to see essentially the Vampire Avengers, that group, as you mentioned before, called the Blood Coven. So they're a group of, super vampires who are to normal vampires as the Avengers are to normal people. And we're going to see them come into conflict pretty early, which is going to be really exciting. Pepe came up with all these great designs for these new characters. They're very cool. So that's going to be what puts the Avengers on their feet, and we'll see, how they deal with that.
Yeah, I'm curious, as you were coming up with the cast for this, obviously it's featuring characters you're writing in other books, but, when you were running through the roster, do you have some examples of heroes you thought who might have an advantage when fighting vampires versus some who were probably in over their heads?
Sure. You look at the Avengers, a lot of them have abilities that are, it's extremely difficult for vampires to deal with. Specifically Scarlet Witch, who, currently possesses the Dark Hold, which itself has the Montesi formula, which is the spell that can kill all vampires on the planet. Similarly, Doctor Strange had cast that previously. So with the vampires trying to take over the world, these are obviously people that are going to be high up on their hit list.
One last question before we go. What aspect of Blood Hunt would you say has you the most excited for readers to experience when it comes out?
It's pretty simple. The art is incredible. You have Pepe Larraz, who is one of the top comic book artists at this point in time, working at the top of his game, and it's just super exciting to see those pages come in. I think people could be really excited to just see how incredible this looks. See these vistas of terror unfolding in a comic book.
Well, thank you, Jed, for getting our blood pumping for the Blood Hunt crossover event. I'm super stoked to read it.
Well, I'm stoked for you to read it.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And thank you to everyone at home. Stick around IGN for more comics, vampires, and comics about vampires. So long.